one and all, and listen to tales of excitement and adventure. Tales of daring heroes, savage monsters, and bards who just couldn't keep it in their pants. Tales of friendship, nobility, drunken foolishness, and unforgettable fun. These are tales of role-playing games, fair listeners, and this is Rollin' Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome to Rollin' Bones with Ryan Howard, your source for the best in RPGs, your RPG treasure trove. I am your host and king of the Boneheads, and maybe it would be more appropriate this evening for me to say greetings programs, since we are talking about some of Hankerin Fernell's work tonight. Those of you who aren't aware, Hankerin's been on a couple times. You may also know him as Brandish Gilhelm. You may be familiar with the Runehammer channel on YouTube, where some great content has been put out in the past, including Drunkens and Dragons, several live streams. Lots of great stuff has come from the mind and mouth and camera of Hankerin Fernell. But tonight we're talking about a couple things that have come from the pen of Hankerin Fernell, namely Index Cards RPG, the second edition, the kind of revised edition, and we're also going to be talking about 5e Hardcore Mode, which I don't have a hard copy of yet. It is coming. But we're going to be talking about both of those. Pardon me. Just to give you guys a quick primer, though, on what the subject matter will be about this evening. You've noticed probably that I've been taking a little bit more of an OSR bent as of late, kind of moving towards old school style rules, streamlined rules, and what I've come to the conclusion of is that I typically will enjoy more of a rules light game. There are some crunchy games that I do enjoy. Every now and then it's fun to play something like that. I do enjoy Savage Worlds, which is not really a rules light game. It's somewhere in the middle, I'd say. But a lot of what I gravitate towards is kind of rules light games that don't let the systems get in the way of what the players are wanting to do or trying to do. There is a little bit of a balance to be struck there, not to immediately walk back what I'm saying, but there is a point at which rules light becomes, what's the point of even doing a role-playing game? And for a lot of people, that line is drawn in different places. Some people think like Apocalypse is a little too light on rules. I once had a player, I believe it was an Apocalypse game. It was not one of the Forged in the Dark games, but I think it was straight up an Apocalypse game that one of the players in my Dark Sun game described as tell a story and roll 2d6 to see if it comes true. Which, again, not having a whole lot of experience with the Apocalypse system, I don't know how accurate that would be from my experience, but I mean, there is a point at which rules light can become, why are we even bothering playing a game when we're clearly just trying to do theater here? I have not found that line, but what I have found is that a lot of kind of the old school mentality about D&D, especially the very old editions of D&D, are very focused on, limited rules, limited aspects of systems and mechanics, a lot of just, you've got the basic stats that you roll, and a lot of other stuff is just kind of ingenuity on the part of the player, without, having a detailed skill system or anything like that. So, a lot of that stuff has been appealing to me lately, and that's definitely something that Hankrin Furnell talks a lot about. I mean, last time he was on the show, we talked a lot about streamlining the experience and, making sure that, games ultimately are more of the good stuff, more of the stuff that you want when you come to the table, and less of the, all right, let's look up the table, let's look at all the different rules that we have to adhere to for this, this, and this. It's, cut to the chase. Let's do what is fun, what we came here to this table to do, and, that's really what we're pursuing here. And you see a lot of this in index cards. And then 5e hardcore mode, which is just kind of a short little... it's about a 30-page PDF. The physical book's a little bit longer because it comes with an adventure. But it's really just an explanation of here's how we streamline 5e to make it a little bit more lethal and a little bit more kind of old school in mind. And there are some aspects of it that I really, really like. Some aspects that I probably wouldn't import into my game. But honestly, that's kind of the beauty of both of these products that we're going to be talking about tonight. They don't have to be used as written. They're designed so that you can take kind of the best parts of them and move them into your game where, you might find that, certain things need to be streamlined or certain aspects need to be eliminated because they're really not doing anyone any favors. So rather than just continue to ramble on here for a little bit, let's actually look at the screen share and take a look at these books. Alrighty, so for those of you listening, we're looking at the PDF of Index Card RPG 2nd edition. This is what we're going to start with. Pardon me. Sorry for the extended silence there, just taking a drink. So yeah, this was published 2 or 3 years ago. I think 3 years ago now. 2018, yep, so 3 years ago. Everything in here, words, pictures, it was all done by Hankrin himself, which is cool. He's done a lot of, great work here. And the layout of this book, just to talk about as we're going through, the game is called Index Card, and that's the whole mindset, aesthetic. Everything looks like it's coming from index cards that a GM would, have for a specific game. And everything in this game is designed to fit on index cards. So a lot of it is, taking some of the physical complexity out of the games. Although, there is some elements of... It relies upon... miniatures and stuff like that, which he, talks about how to make them and make them simply so that, you're not just stuck with, okay, I need to get miniatures now. It's not a miniatures combat game. It's, there's lots of different ways to play. And ultimately, here, I won't scroll past the introduction here to start, because we'll go through this. But ultimately... And this came straight from Hankrin's mouth when he was on the show last. ICRPG, more than anything else, is a mindset. It is an attitude which you can approach your game with. It is a new way to look at, run, and play RPGs more than anything. It's a system. You can certainly take this book and run campaigns with it, but you can also take what you learn from this book, take ideas from this book, and bring them into D&D or Pathfinder or, whatever system you're running. It really... a lot of people I see, and Professor Dungeon Master, who's going to be on the show next week, he's one that does this a lot. He talks about, taking ideas from ICRPG and taking ideas from 5e hardcore mode and incorporating them into the 5e rule set. So, if nothing else, like if you don't think this is a good system in and of itself, but you like some of the ideas that you see in it, none of this stuff is hard and fast. It's designed to kind of, let's take this idea, let's take that idea, and really simplify what, the game should be. Really kind of, bring out the essentials. So here in the introduction, it talks about what you're, looking to do with this book. Build your own world, run a great game, be an epic player, master your creativity. I like this line here. ICRPG takes the stance that creativity can never be tamed. It is a feral thing. Like lightning across the clouds or waves on a stone, it crashes and disappears. It's fickle, impetuous, and insolent. ICRPG is a tool to wrestle this beast, bring it out of its lair, and make your next tabletop session the best you've ever played. That really, sums up what this is about. This is about, bringing your game to the next level. And then down here it also, explains, ICRPG gives you freedom. It talks a little bit about, balancing the, it's more visual than theater of the mind, but faster and more portable, more accessible. I think that's supposed to say accessible. It says extensible. I don't know if that's a word, but I will give Hankerin the benefit of the doubt. It's more improvisational than a massive 3D terrain set. Which, that's another thing I want to talk about, and we'll be talking about that a lot next week. Hankerin's eliminated the need for a grid. Now, this is not new to anyone who's familiar with what Professor Dungeon Master does or familiar with ICRPG itself. But a lot of what Hankerin has done in the system is to streamline movement, which is cool. And here he explains kind of the basic flow. It's attempts and effort. Attempts are, what you roll. You roll to attempt something, and then effort is like the damage from the attack or what happens after you succeed, putting effort towards the goal. And the reason he calls it effort is it's not just damage, because every attempt has subsequent effort that, builds out what you're doing as you succeed, after you succeed, what that means. So it's your basic, here's the target number, here's the DC, roll, add your stats, add a modifier if you have one from... any magical items or loot is the word that Hankerin uses here. And if you meet or beat the target number of the room or challenge, then you put forth effort towards the goal and, you move on. And then this book for, anyone who's wanting to use this as a system in and of itself, Hankerin also includes a couple different worlds that you can inhabit for your game. One of them is Alfheim, which is his world from the Runehammer novels. He does have novels for anyone who's interested. Those are on Amazon. And then there's also Warp Shell, which is like a, science fiction type setting. It's a little bit Star Wars, a little bit Gamma World. You can see a lot of kind of the influences of Gamma World and things like that in, what he has in Warp Shell. We're not going to be talking a lot about that, because that's not generally what I'm looking at with this. At some point, I might revisit talking about, Alfheim and Warp Shell. I am planning on doing a video about settings specifically, as I'm trying to create my own, for publishing. I'm going to go through some stuff about setting, and I'll probably save Hankrin's details about Alfheim and Warp Shell for my setting video. So, we'll be talking about that. And here he talks about, the tools that you need. Usually I don't go over this, but we'll talk about kind of, what we need here, since this is an RPG that is built around, basically just needing pen and paper and dice. So that's, the first thing, pencil and pen, calls it the ultimate weapon of imagination. A notebook, dice, it's your 7 classic, D4, D6, D8, 2D10 for percentile, D12, and a D20. And then talks about ICRPG print and play. These are the miniatures that he has. He's got paper miniatures that he sells on drive-thru, which are cool. It's kind of his take on, figure flats, which, Paizo has been doing. Also, if you have miniatures, you can get your miniatures, your maps, all that stuff. And then he mentions, lastly, friends and food and drink, which I find food and drink is always good to have in an RPG. The first time I ever played D&D, I remember going over to a strange guy who I met on the internet's house, or apartment rather, in Charlotte, North Carolina. This wasn't Muhammad. He was actually my second DM, but I only played with this guy twice. So, Muhammad's basically my first DM. The one who saw me through my first 3 years of life as a role player. But I go over to this guy's house, and I'm under 21. They don't know this until I tell them, because they're like, "Hey, you want a glass of wine or a beer or something like that?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm 19. They're like, "Oh, okay, all right. We'll give you one anyway." And I was just like, maybe next time. But still, basically, all that to say, the GM says, I GM better when I have a little bit of a buzz. And it's something that I've kind of adopted myself. I'm usually drinking whiskey when I'm GMing, sometimes a beer, sometimes something like that. And I found that, a lot of dungeon masters do that. And a lot of players do that. I'd avoid getting sloppy drunk unless everyone's getting drunk, because you don't want that one individual at the table who's drunker than everyone else. Lucas. I've told that story before, though. And it was just a one-time thing, so. But yeah, food and drink, part of what I miss about in-person gaming that I'm hoping to get back is this notion of, we're not just playing a game, we're also kind of breaking bread together. We're drinking together, a lot of times we're eating together. On my Wednesday night game, we would all either, have eaten beforehand or be sharing some kind of snack or, eating food at the table, even if we brought our own. And when I was running games on Saturday nights, we would always have some kind of meal. And usually we would eat before the game started, take turns cooking, get pizza, something like that. But food is always a key aspect of RPGs. So I'm glad that he mentions that. And then here he breaks down, why it's called ICRPG. And says, for years, players have been using index cards to represent buildings, people, locations, corridors, and more. The game simply says, let's run with that. It's also a highly refined and innovative rule set that can stand on its own or enhance your current game. And then this is talking a little bit about print and play here. And creating bits, which are your pieces, your miniatures. So if you've got miniatures like I do, I've got too many miniatures. That's what I'll be using instead of bits. But if you don't, and you still want that, tactile feel to your game, Hankerin goes to great detail here to, talk about how to build these bits, how to build the print and play characters, all that stuff. It's a good little piece if you don't have a lot of miniatures. Just talking a little bit about all the different things you can do as far as making sure that you've got pieces to represent your characters. And then we get into the rules themselves. Talks about just, welcome to the table, a little bit of an introduction there. Talks about the importance of the game master setting the scene, describing, what's going on, recapping the last session, kind of bringing the players up to speed as you come into the table, whether it's your first session or your 15th or whatever. It's important to set the scene. I like, Matt Colville kind of turned me on to this. I like having one of the players explain what happened last time. Because, as he says, you can get the player's perspective on what was important and what wasn't, what stuck in their minds and what didn't. And that really helps you as a dungeon master understand, what the players are going to remember, what's going to stand out to them. And it gives you a way to improve your game. And it also lets the players, have another moment. And I think he, rewards inspiration for the person who can recap the game. I haven't done that. Maybe I should start. I'm bad about giving out inspiration, though. I'm honestly, I should be better about that, especially with the group that I have, giving out inspiration for cool ideas. So, and this also, there's no initiative system in ICRPG. Initiative works basically clockwise, from left of the game master on. Which, is good and bad. I've heard Professor Dungeon Master talk a lot about not liking the initiative boards. And I know, you can strategically arrange yourselves at the table. I am a creature of comfort, and since I'm usually behind the GM screen, this doesn't really apply to me, because, I stay in the same spot no matter what. But even as a player, we tend to have our favorite spots at the table, for whatever reason. Maybe it's superstition, maybe you just like, that chair or something. So I like the idea of being able to arrange the table in a certain way, but, knowing myself as a player, I wouldn't want to move. Especially if I, dug in, got all my stuff out. because I'm a gamer who has a lot of stuff. I bring my books, like all my books, in case something comes up. I've got a bunch of dice. I've got a miniature, and then food. So yeah, I've got a ton of stuff. My character sheet or my phone, because I've been using my phone as a character sheet for the past couple times I've been playing. Just, I don't know, save a couple trees, I guess, maybe. I don't know. It's easier to level up when you have your character sheet on a phone, because then you just, put in the level up stuff, and everything else after that. The problem with physical character sheets is you erase them so many times, then you need a new one, then you have to fill out the new one. It's a pain. But I'm well afield of what we're supposed to be talking about here. And then this breaks down what a turn looks like. This next page. It's basically describe your action, roll, and then view the results. And then, from there you get into moving and actions. And this is where Hankrin begins to talk a little bit more about the movement system and how kind of the grid has been eliminated. So if you watch Professor Dungeon Master on YouTube, you've seen the UDT, the Ultimate Dungeon Terrain, which is a circle for near range, a circle where you're close, a circle for near range, and then far. So I bring that up because your actions here are move far, which is a double movement. You can move 2 zones in. So you go from far to near to close. And that's, the equivalent of a dash. He also uses a banana-based distance system, which we'll get to in a couple pages. Other than that, you can move near and make an action. That's, your typical turn, rather. So you move one zone, and then you can do some kind of action. He's got examples here. 3 kinds of actions: simple, check, and attempt. Simple actions are, stuff like switching weapons, drinking a potion, talking to an ally, making a check, which uses your stats, and then, you use your stats to, meet or beat the target, and then an attempt, which is the most common type. This is D20 plus stats. And then after that you roll effort to see the result of that. So attempt would be like an attack or trying to hack something in a sci-fi game. Something like that. Casting a spell. That's an attempt. A check is something like, looking for bad guys off in the distance is the example that he uses. Trying to read the ancient text. Something like that is a check. Attempts are more active, I suppose. And then, of course, you can also stay put and make an action. And that's, your typical turn. And you basically just get to do one action per turn. There are no bonus actions, quick actions, anything like that. You just... you do it. You do it, and it's done. So as far as the target and effort system goes, this is your classic CR DC situation. The GM has a target number in mind, and you are rolling to see if you meet or beat it to succeed in the task. The lower your target number, the easier the task, the higher, the harder. And here he also explains some of the things that, make the targets go up or down, as far as, like making them go easier. You've already tried it once. Your character has experience. There's no duress, no distraction. Nothing's pressing at the moment. You have an ally assisting you, or you have loot that makes something easy. So a magic item that's what loot is. And then as far as hard tasks, you have distractions or some kind of time constraint. You're unfamiliar with what you're doing. There's some kind of magical resistance to your effort. You're injured. Or, he says here, it's a really long way to jump. And then assuming you meet or beat the target for attempt, you get to roll effort. And this is he calls it the most unique and expansive mechanic in ICRPG. And so this is effort to overcome a task or an enemy. And so examples of this are, weapons effort is damage when you attack an enemy. Magic effort measures your progress in casting a spell, deciphering ancient text in a magic book. When doing a simple task, basic work is the struggle and strain of your fingers and brain, and toil away. This is what the text here says. And then when you roll a 20 on the attempt, when you crit, you roll an additional d12 effort for what he calls ultimate effort. I guess because maximum effort might be trademarked. Thank you, Marvel. And this just, helps you. So that is across the board. So even if your weapon does, let's say, a d6 damage, you roll a 20, you'd be rolling a d12 on top of that d6. And then any obstacle or enemy that you're making effort against will have hearts. That's your HP mechanic there. Each heart represents 10 effort for you to overcome. And so, rolling a d12, a decent chance. Like a, 10, 11, 12, like a third chance. A 1 in 3 chance that you're going to knock out a whole heart. And then here's some examples of, like common checks that you would make against a target number. So strength checks, dex checks, con checks. And it lists, examples here. Strength, holding on for dear life, stop a rolling wagon, stand firm against a howling wind. Dex, jump over an obstacle, aim a cannon, sneak up on a target, dodge a fireball. Constitution, fight off being stunned, resist freezing cold, outdrink a dwarven king, resist poison. Int, defend against mind control, remember the password. Speak a second language or remember a legend. Wisdom, spot enemies from afar, resist confusion with faith. Notice a trap, and then intuit the thoughts of a beast, and then charisma. You guys know these. Resist brainwashing. Interestingly enough, that is a charisma check. I would consider that part of intelligence, but I guess it's different from mind control. because it would be, one personality asserting itself over another, so there's that. Not my hill, not my beans. So, there you go. Although, as the GM, it would be my hill and my beans. So, I'd be able to make that call. And then down... Pardon me. Sorry. Down here at the bottom, you've got some examples of pass and fail, of what would happen if you, fail certain checks, and what would happen if you pass. All this stuff is, kind of standard for what you're looking at in RPGs. Again, this is not necessarily groundbreaking stuff. It's just simplify. Simplify, simplify, simplify. And then down here you have examples of attempts. With strength, you're looking at attack with a melee weapon, bend prison bars, smash through a wall, force the airlock closed, anything physical, really. Dexterity, ranged attacks, climb a rope, pick locks, delicate tasks. Constitution, the only attempt you're looking at there is recovery, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Intelligence, casting a spell, deciphering a tablet, learning new things, stuff like that. Wisdom, channeling divine or natural power, training an animal, mending a wound, tracking. And charisma is more, social stuff, influencing people, inspiring your allies, intimidating someone. And then we get into movement. And so he talks here, to quote the text again, every tabletop player has asked, how far can I get on my turn? And from the rules above, you only know you can move far or you can move near and take an action. So what are far and near in game terms? So this is where the banana comes in. This is the banana-based movement system. Far is 50 feet. And it would take a few seconds to get in a flat-out run. A far shot can be hard to hit, or it may be too far to cast a certain spell. And anything further than 50 feet counts as far. Far is the distance a character can move in one turn. Near's quick few steps. And he mentions here it's close enough for a spear, but not close enough for a dagger. So anything with reach you can hit from near range, but not, anything that would be kind of close up. That would take a little bit, that would take some movement. And the near, of course, is... near we just talked about. Close is the final movement stage, and that is face-to-face, toe-to-toe, as Hankerin says here. And I've talked a little bit about the banana-based system, just to start. And basically, the length of a banana on a tabletop would be near. Just based on the drawing here. And then close would be, looks like about half a banana. And far is anything longer than that. And then he talks about when distance matters, which is, attack distance, area of effect, traversal, getting the upper hand, bending the rules, which mentions here many of the things that make loot and character growth awesome are your increasing ability to overcome distance limits with incredible speed, flight, or even teleportation. These abilities, combined with a sense of tactics, make a formidable fighter. Weapons obviously have different range. And then communicating with characters. Close allies can talk in a whisper. Near can use normal speaking voices. And far must be, you have to yell. And then he talks a little bit about time. And what he talks about here is that everything happens in turns. So whether you're in combat or out of combat, downtime, it doesn't matter. Everything happens, the player to the left of the GM goes first, and then it goes from there. So, it keeps things a little bit more focused. It prevents the constant shuffling of... initiative. That's the word that was missing. Wow. Too much whiskey. Even though it was my normal amount. And there's also not a tight time frame on what everyone's doing. So it's not like every turn is 6 seconds. You can do that, but you can also do, let's say, you're in free time. So, like every move or every turn is, like 15 minutes or something like that. You can break it up however you want. And it just keeps moving player to player clockwise no matter what happens or what time frame you're in. It talks about moments, hours, and days are kind of the 3 units of time used in ICRPG. Moments is, what's going on in combat. This is your 5 to 10 seconds. Hours are your kind of, between battle, and each player turn represents 1 to 3 hours. And then days is like, okay, let's say you're in some serious downtime. Your actions span between 1 to 5 days each. So basically you just go around the table saying, what are you going to do over the next few days? Which is cool. Again, I like that a lot. That is something that I would definitely bring into my game, even in 5e where, time is very specifically laid out. So even in that kind of situation, I would still probably, bring in some of these ideas here. Because I like the idea of even... we're moving in sequence, even out of combat. Now, this is something I'm only going to be able to implement once we're back at a table, because it's hard to determine, who's left of the GM in Zoom. That's, difficult, and it's difficult to shuffle around. So, what... Again, that's coming soon. So, once I'm back at the table, this is something that I'm definitely going to implement as far as, we're going to move in order. And if 2 people want to switch places, they can switch places. And then there's example here of, different things that take multiple days. And then talking about treasure. Seek ye treasures. And so, loot is the term that Hankerin uses for, treasure, magic items, all that stuff. So, ways that you can score loot, milestone rewards. So, at a certain point, you might get a specific magical item or weapon. just by reaching a certain level. Looting a fallen foe, you can find something on a dead enemy. But one example of milestone rewards to think of just popped into my head here. A situation like in Lord of the Rings, where once Frodo actually gets to Rivendell, you can think of what Bilbo gives him as kind of milestone rewards. If you think about leaving the Shire up until Rivendell being first level, or even, let's say, first through third level. So, by the time he gets to Rivendell, he's third level. At that point, Bilbo is giving him 2 magic items, Mithril shirt, and Sting. And you can look at Lord of the Rings very easily as a tabletop, because there are certain points in the story where characters are given kind of like milestone objects. When they meet Galadriel is a good example of this, or when Aragorn finally gets the sword. That's a good example. So yeah, I mean, milestone rewards, it's kind of, baked into fantasy. But a lot of people forget about it. I like to keep that in my games. I do that, even now, I kind of do milestone rewards. And then you can also find stuff, or, a king can bestow it on you. And then here he talks about chests. Not always are you just going to find loose loot. Sometimes it's in a chest, a foot locker. You have to make an attempt and then roll effort to open a chest. There are 3 possible versions of this process, either standard or mighty chests. If you roll to open is a natural 20, you roll 1 D100 twice. So simple chest is no attempt or check. You just pop the chest open and roll 1 D100 on the loot table assigned by the GM. Standard chest, strength, dex, or int. Basically whatever your best is to figure out a way to open this thing. And then, if you succeed, the chest opens and you roll again. Mighty chest. Same, strength, dex, or int. And this one possesses 1 heart of challenge to overcome. Use basic effort to get it done. Unless you have some kind of magical means to enhance the roll. And then if you roll natural 20, you get to add a d12. And then basic effort is d4. So let's say you're trying to pull a door open. You make your attempt, and then you roll your d4 effort. So if it's got 1 heart, you could knock out 1 to 4 effort there. Or 1 to 4 HP, essentially. And these should, come with different kinds of loot, different things, that kind of stuff. Your mighty chest is not going to have something tiny in it. It's probably going to have something really awesome in it. And then you get into loot types, food, gear, and spells and powers. So you basically have to find these spells in this game. And then it talks a little bit about death. When you're reduced to 0 hit points, you're dying. That means you're unconscious, bleeding out, and running out of time. After you are dropped, roll a d6. And in that many of your turns, you are dead. So don't roll a 1. And then you use that d6 to count it down. And then on each of your turns during your dying countdown, you roll a d20, and if you get a natural 20, you jump up miraculously with 1 hit point. And then to stop the countdown, an ally has to reach out and help you. It's a wisdom or intelligence roll, and that stops the countdown. And then you are unconscious until you are brought back with medical supplies, healing magic, or sufficient rest. And then if you get negative 20 hit points, so you go below your hit points and then take 20 more damage, then you're dead. Annihilated. And then there's recovery, of course. Let's see what this says here. Basically, so there's this black box here talking a little bit about, questions that Hankerin fields about death at the table. And so basically he says, with death, there are different philosophies, but you need to be clear and decisive about death. If the player dies by the rules in total fairness, then they're dead. And then know what happens next. Does the session end there? Is there a new hero to be brought in? You have to be clear with your PC what happens when their character dies, which is important. And so back to recovery, just, to get back to what we were talking about. So as far as moments go, in combat, you have the slimmest chance of recovery. Basically, if you spend a combat turn in recovery, meet or beat the current target with a con roll to recover 1 hit point, you can get 1 hit point back. And then between battles, in complete safety, you can use 1 turn to recover 1 heart, 10 hit points. And he says here the concept of safety is crucial. So it's really up to the dungeon master to determine what is and is not safety. And then as far as days go, spending days of time in complete safety, recover all hearts with no roll, no problem. If your ordeal was bad enough, the GM may choose to blight you with an injury or terrible scar. So yeah, that's recovery. And then we get into characters. We'll talk a little bit about this because a lot of the character stuff is very system specific and setting specific. But the basic concept here is you choose an image. This is what your character looks like. You choose a miniature, choose a picture, draw a picture, something like that. That's your hero. Then you come up with a story based on the image. So the image is first, which is critical, I think, to the nature of what is going on in index card RPG. So just as an example, if I grab one of my miniatures here, this guy, I don't know how clearly you can see that, but it's basically, a big barbarian type character who I've painted as a mole from Dark Sun. This guy is going to have a very different backstory from this guy, Marv from Sin City, basically. So, what's the image you're going for your character? Is it Marv? Is it this mole? Is it, something like a huckster from Deadlands? Elven archer, warrior princess, I don't know, whatever the miniature or picture that you come up with or that you see says to you, that is where your backstory needs to come from. Then you build your stats and effort. You get 6 points to distribute amongst your stats. So basically, you don't really have a number as far as like, oh, I have a 20 strength. It's purely just the number that you add to your stats. So, 6 points and 6 stats. So you can have a +1 to everything. You can do, +2 to strength, dex, and con. You can, however you want to split up those 6 points. It's up to you. And then there's an explanation of the stats. Armor, for each point you put into armor, your enemies will have a harder time hitting you. Everyone wearing clothes gets a starting armor of 10. For each point you put here, add 1 to that for your armor total. So, what this is saying is those 6 points are not just for your stats, it's also for your armor. And for your effort. I believe. Actually, effort's different, so leave that off. Anything you do with your bare hands, any basic work, and bare hands and raw wits, that is a D4 for effort. Weapons damage is always a D6, no matter what weapon you're using. And then any kind of magic is a D8 for effort. And then ultimate, if you roll a 20, that's a D12. And then as part of building your character, you choose kind of gear that fits with your character. So you've got, starter loot that you can pick 1 from, and then you choose 3 from universal starting equipment. So as far as the loot, you've got, like 20 rounds of magic ammo, a weapon kit, which gives you +2 weapon effort, a ring of might for +1 strength, all that stuff. Okay, so from what I'm seeing here, you can actually put points into effort and add to it. So if you want to deal more damage, that's a way to do it. Based on this here. And then, like your basic equipment, you're looking at, a shield, common armor, which gives you +1 to your armor, trapper gear, miner's gear, tools, spellbook, rope and hook for, a grappling hook, basically, to climb things. And then you can choose up to 3 starting weapons. Honestly, I like this a little bit better than the starting equipment for D&D. A lot of the starting equipment for D&D, because, if you're using a gold system, that's one thing. Like, your players have to buy their gear, but if not, which I've never played a game where someone's been like, all right, you need to buy your gear. It's usually just, okay, what can I get away with bringing to the table? And usually that depends on your level. So if you're starting at level 1 and you're a fighter, you're probably only going to be able to grab ring mail or, something like that. Chainmail. That's your armor. But if you're, level 5, you might be able to get away with full plate. Or at least splint. So I like the idea of, here's, choose 3 from this, choose 1 magic item, and then choose, 3 weapons that you want to carry. And so as far as weapons, you've got dagger, short sword, long sword, great sword, axe, battle axe, halberd, staff, spear, siege spear, mace, hammer, flail, longbow, shortbow, sling, crossbow. And because of the way, and then he goes into some like guns and stuff that you can use in the the other setting. Because all weapons damage uses a d6, this can be anything. Anything, which I really like. If all weapons have the same damage, it doesn't matter what weapon you're using, which is cool, honestly. So it's whatever fits with your character. Let's say you're Danny Trejo's character from the movie Desperado. So all you are doing is throwing knives. All you have is knives. You're still doing the same amount of damage. Whereas in 5e, if you're playing that kind of character, you're dealing d4 damage. Which, maybe you've got different things to make that better, but d4 damage. But yeah, past that, he's got some weapon tags here, which add some mechanics if you want to. But mostly they're just there for flavor. And it's all kinds of stuff like, reach, siege, sturdy, smashes armor, deadly, easy to use, elegant, expensive, far, fast, free, giant, cannot be concealed, chopping. It's a lot of like common sense stuff that you can put on certain armor or certain weapons. And then it talks a little bit about, gear destruction. So a shield isn't the only thing that takes a beating. As you fight your way to glory, you're bound to lose gear along the way. How and if you replace it becomes a big deal. I use a sword, not a spear. Unacceptable. Again, I like that a lot. And it talks here a little bit about, spells as loot. It says if you're building a magic character, you acquire spells as starter rewards, milestone rewards, or found loot. If your spellcaster acquires spells in a different way, just work with your GM to make it fit your concept of magical progression. And then it talks about, each character as they start gets 10 hit points, so 1 heart. And you gain more hearts just as you go. Classes, there are different classes depending on your setting that you're using. So we can go through here. I like a lot of these class ideas because they're very open. So for Alfheim, you've got Guardian, Blade, Shadow, Archer, Priest, Scout, Mage, Commander, Wildling. A lot of these things are very evocative of, what they represent. Wildlings are, wanderers. A ranger might fall into there if they don't fit into scout. Barbarian might fit as a wildling. Druid, definitely. Commander, mage. Those both kind of are, self-explanatory. Scout is kind of more your traditional ranger. Priest, cleric type character. Archer, that's your ranged fighter. Shadow, obviously thief. Rogue, cutthroat, that kind of person. Blade, this is like an assassin or a mercenary or someone like that. And then a guardian is like a paladin, pretty much. Or a knight. And then, it talks a little bit about some of the races here. Elves, dwarves, halflings, humans, giants. Then you get into Warp Shell, and you've got tanks, Ronins, ghosts, gunners. Again, we'll talk in more detail about that stuff when we talk about world building and settings and, just how all that stuff fits in. And then we get into spell casting a little bit. You've got wisdom powers here. So a lot of this is, like faith-based stuff, and then you have intelligence spells. And basically, you get these spells as, you pick them up. They have to be equipped or carried. All that stuff. And there's just examples here. Then you've got some like spellcaster options as far as, schools of magic, spell books. It talks a little bit about what happens if you roll a 1 on your attempt. You roll a d4 and, there's a backfire table. Same with wisdom. And then we get in some world primers. I'm going to move past a little bit of this stuff because we're not talking about these specific worlds. And then we get into game mastery. And this is probably going to be the last section we talk about. And basically, he has this Dungeon Master Oath, which is, I will let the torrent flow, I will remember everything, I will build a world from their actions. I will be an architect. I will be poetic. I will be energetic. I will lift them up and vanish. I will be a beacon of camaraderie. I will be a terror to behold. So to break those down, basically you just, unleash your... I will let the torrent flow, unleash your ideas, don't let structure, limit, or intended results slow you down. Just let your creative juices flow. I will remember everything. You have to know, the rules, the setting, all that stuff. It's your job to know that. You will build a world from their actions. Basically, you create a skeletal structure, and then your players' interaction with that world builds out the world itself and sets in motion events. I will be an architect. You have to design how everything is laid out spatially and also, culturally and stuff like that. You are a builder. I will be poetic. You have to bring out emotion. You have to create a world that your players want to interact with. Appeal to the humanity of the players, all that stuff. I will be energetic. You have to have energy to be a dungeon master. You have to be able to grip the players, excite them, all that stuff. I will lift them up and vanish. Basically, make your players the center of everything. You're not there to conquer them. You are there to see them through the tragedies that you put in place. Everything has to be about making the players greater. But of course, there has to be challenge there. Beacon of camaraderie. You basically have to maintain the cohesion and the, everyone getting along at the table. That is your job. You are the social referee. And, as a host, you have to be gracious and stuff like that. And then I will be a terror to behold. Obviously, you have to bring the challenge. Otherwise, what's the point of playing the game? And honestly, that really is that's everything. There's, he gets into stuff of, like, where are the heroes, what is their goal, and what stands between the two. Basic stuff. And there are, examples of this for your, different settings here. And then he talks about the narrative and mechanical techniques of building encounters. So narrative devises encounters and adventures. You string everything together and, basically you're setting out some kind of story arc that happens. Mechanical, these are like specific challenges. So one's more focused on the mechanics of the game, the other's more focused on the storytelling and, ultimately what it leads to. That's all good. That makes sense. And then, there's talking about thinking in sessions, what all do you want to accomplish in a session, making each session self-contained, you're playing one at a time, all that stuff. Playing with your expectations, improvising details, and planning, big events. Because you can't plan everything, obviously. It talks about, ending a session. And, like when something big happens, as far as sessions go, he recommends, roll a d6 on a 1. In that many rounds, the game is over for the night. And honestly, I think that might be a thing for me moving forward, because I always struggle with, where do we end? Usually I have an ending in mind, but, like wrapping it up, how do we get there? So, like I roll a d6, or, the player who something significant just happened to, they roll a d6. And from there, we end the game at that point. That's cool. I like that a lot. Definitely stealing that. Because then it gives, this is the last thing we're going to do. That final, everyone's final go-around gives some real, gravitas to that. And he mentions that here. All that stuff. And talks about, like what makes something easy or hard for the players. Seems to be like 12 is kind of the middle. Maybe 10 is probably the middle, I'd say, based on a D20 roll. And then he's usually recommending, plus and minus 3 as far as CR goes. And then hearts. Obviously hearts are 10 hit points. And then he does talk a little bit about initiative system here. While most things move like Dungeon Master on, you can actually, he mentions a system here where everyone rolls a d20 unmodified, and whoever rolls the highest, their player gets to go first. I do like that more than just everything starts from the GM onward, because even the GM's involved in the roll-off. So that's a good mechanic. I like that a lot. And I feel like it adds something here. But, whoever rolls highest, they're number 1. Everything moves to their left on. So, yeah. That's all cool. And, yeah, a lot of this stuff is just, cool ideas here moving in. And he moves on, talking into ICRPG as a plugin. So you can, he mentions here, trade stats for stats. So if you're playing 5e, instead of, I've got a 13 intelligence, I just have a 1 intelligence, because that's the number that matters. Effort and non-combat tasks, roll your assigned effort, single target. And what this talks about is the kind of room DC. And what this does, I haven't mentioned this up to this point, but one of the things that Hankerin does in this game is for certain times there'll be a room DC. So basically, this is a hard room. This is a DC 17 room. So everything here has a challenge. You have to hit a 17 to do anything in here. It simplifies everything. So, that your mileage may vary with that. So yeah. And he talks about using dice types for damage. So he says, consolidate your game's dice variations into easy to remember categories when the spells, upgrade, or weapons is improved. The dice are easy to remember. So let's say you start with 1d8, 2d8, 3d8 as far as, when they upgrade. So yeah, chests to earn treasure is cool. Taking away HP and adding hearts. We'll get to that in just a second as we talk about hardcore mode here at the end. But yeah, this is ICRPG in a nutshell. I've talked a lot about it tonight, more than I actually anticipated. But this is a very cool system to use either by itself or, as I'm going to do moving forward, as, a plug-in to 5e. This streamlines a lot of things, makes a lot of things easier to remember. It's a good system. Honestly, it's great for just kind of taking out the filler for those of you who want to take some of it out and making things a little bit more streamlined and simple. And that's the core of it. And so if that's what you're looking to do, this is the book for you. Now, streamlined and simple is one thing, but what about dangerous and deadly? I'm glad you asked. As you can see here, as we get to the very end, we are looking at a skull D2, basically, with arrows sticking out of it and everything. This is 5e hardcore mode. And this is something that he put out in 2020. This is something that I was actually turned on to not by Hankerin, which is interesting. This was something that Professor Dungeon Master actually introduced me to. And what this is basically taking the framework of 5e, adding in a little bit of the index card attitude, and basically making your games deadly. And as, simple and difficult as they can be. If those two things make sense together. Difficult as in challenging, not difficult as in difficult to understand. Because it actually does simplify a lot of things. So here he mentions the hardcore way, be fair but merciless, be a friend of death, don't be afraid to kill characters, that kind of stuff, and prize intensity over detail. So focus basically on the big moments here. And so your tenets here which he expounds on as we go through. 3d6 attributes. You roll 3d6 in order. No dropping the lowest, and no picking where your stats go. So this is not conducive to coming to the table saying, I want to roll a fighter, let me roll my dice and put things where they go. This is, let's see what I roll. I would allow for the innkeeper rule in this situation, just FYI. But, you roll your attributes in order. Pure hit dice. Roll a class hit dice once, even at level 1 with no modifiers, and those are your hit points. Hit dice also replace the other stat system, or some other stat systems. Simple skills, feats and skills, other abilities are compressed into an on-off bonus system. You're either skilled or not. Injured. It's the effects of lingering pain, death. No more easy mode, 1 death save, instant death at -10 hit points, and narrative continuance when death occurs. Zimmer's Candle, this is like a bonfire system for D&D. It's a portable save point that you can use for a little bit of recovery in a dungeon type situation. It's basically like the bonfire from Dark Souls. Think of it that way. Spell slots by level, or spells by level. No more slots unlock by character level or use freeform acquisition. Roll to cast. Basically, you don't just cast a spell, you have to roll to see if you cast it. This will be controversial. But as Professor Dungeon Master, I've used his name so many times this evening. As he likes to say, you are dealing with the forces of creation and chaos. So it should be a little bit more of, a risk than swinging a sword, let's say. Because the worst that happens if you recklessly swing a sword is you, cut your leg off. The worst that happens if you're playing with the forces of nature is you're driven insane by the void. And then characters can only progress to level 10. This is the only thing I don't like about 5e hardcore mode here. Then you have classic experience points, where different classes level faster, some level slower. The upper hand, which compresses mechanics, modifiers, and situational elements with the more potent version of the advantage system, which is the bread and butter of 5e. Modifying monsters with your 5e monster books. Zoned movement, which we've already talked about. And then, the theme of Grimdark. And your GM style in this. So, stats, this is pretty self-explanatory. It talks about role-playing low rolls. Everyone knows what to do with a 16 strength or an 18 dex, but how to deal with a 6 intelligence or 7 con. Be ye doomed? You are a hero of substance. Stand fast. Here are a few ideas to explain your worst stats. So, grizzled veteran, you have seen it all, been there, killed that, and barely made it out alive. All the wars and death have taken their toll. What you suffer an injury, though, you balance with cunning. So the blight, a plague, has stricken you with some kind of ailment that affects you. Accursed, someone has put a curse on you. Animal kin, you're part beast. The kid, you're super young. Or, iron touched. A new kind of metal has been revealed by the mountains of dwarves, but the iron poisons the veins of some, and vexes them with pain. What are the secrets of the black iron? That kind of stuff. So, some explanations for why you've got a low stat. Then you get into hardcore hit dice. This will lower your HP. So everything is going to die a lot easier in this case. Even monsters will have lower HP. And it also simplifies healing with hit dice. So at each level, you roll your class hit dice, and that is your max HP. You don't add your con modifier, no rerolls, no max outcomes. You can have 5 HP at 5th level. And then in short rests, you can expend hit dice as normal to regain HP. Medical aid, non-magical medicine, bandages or tinctures are used. Roll 1 hit die without the need to expend it. Or in combat, you can grit your teeth. You make a con roll against a DC 10. If you succeed, you can use 1 hit die to roll and recover that many HP. And then it talks a little bit about, what kind of hit dice you're looking at for size. That's more for building NPCs than anything else. Because in 5e, your class will have an assigned hit die. Then you get into skilled and unskilled. So your proficiency bonus is basically everything. And so if you are skilled in acrobatics, you can add your proficiency bonus. If not, then you don't. And that's it. I'm having a little bit of trouble, kind of sussing out the difference between that and like your regular skills in 5e, because the skill system in 5e is not very complicated. And there aren't like skill ranks in 5e either. You're proficient or you're not. And either way, you're just rolling, plus the raw stat. Although the unskilled thing here, you don't get to add the stat. It's just a raw d20. So there is that. And I'm assuming rogues still get their specialization in that case, which would just double your proficiency bonus. And then injury in 5e. If you're hit with 10 or more damage on a single attack or effect, you can't use Grit Your Teeth to recover hit points, and no roll you make benefits from the attribute bonus, proficiency only. And your dex bonus no longer adds to your armor class. And then you're no longer injured when you receive 10 or more hit points back from healing magic. You receive 10 or more points of healing from medical means, or you take a long rest in safety. You're dead if you're reduced to negative 10 hit points. You're unconscious and bleeding out for 3 rounds if you drop to 0. And then you get 1 death save. And if you fail that save, you're out. Then it talks about Zimmer's candle. Again, this is like the bonfire from Dark Souls. So, at designated moments in time and space, where they place Zimmer's candle, they light it, it's in a safe place, and at least one hero must be able to call upon the candle to activate it. It's a relic. And it allows you... you can basically return there in an instant. So it's basically like it's a save point, essentially. It lets your players go back in certain instances of time. And then you've got spells, not slots. So basically, at level up time, you choose 3 new spells of your current level, and they're cast at their native level. Cantrips, you just use as normal. So basically, you get 3 spells each level at that level. So at level 1, you get 3 level 1. Then you get 3 level 2 at level 2, 3 level 3 at level 3. And there's no spell slots or anything like that. You just, you cast them. And then you have to roll to cast your spells. And if you fail, so it's a DC 10 to succeed, which can, raise or lower depending on what's going on. Intelligence or wisdom depending on how you cast. Critical successes do not expend the spell's use limits and inflict double effect. And creature or critical failure fizzles. And you roll on the volatile magic table as far as critical fumbles go. And every day you can memorize your level plus 2 of any spells if you are cleric, druid, or paladin. Bard, sorcerers, wizards, and warlocks. You memorize your level times 2 each day from your learned list, and as you memorize a spell, once you use it, it's gone from your head. So your level 3, you can memorize 6 spells. Those are your spells. And cantrips are cantrips. Those are your basic attacks. And then level 10. Hardcore mode caps characters at level 10. I like to go beyond level 10, personally. So, if it's an option, I say let it go. And then it talks about classic XP. So back in ye olden days, certain classes leveled faster than others, and certain leveled slower. Rogues level faster than everyone else. Looks like bards are roughly on par with rogues as well. Barbarians too. Fighters are a little bit higher than them. Druid, ranger, and paladin and cleric are all, you start with 300 and you go from there as far as XP goes. And then wizard is the longest path as far as level up goes. Because being a wizard is harder. You have fewer hit points, you can do fewer things, all that stuff. And then there's the idea of the take. So basically, you only get XP because of the take. You only get XP when you get back to safety. So once you get a full rest in total safety, that's when you get your XP. So you go into a dungeon at 3rd level, slog all the way through it, and then when you get to the end, maybe at that point you get up to 4th or 5th level. But not until you get out of the dungeon. And that talks about, multi-classing. if your GM allows it, you can get a total of 10 levels and a maximum of 3 classes. If you're only going to do 10 levels, then I would recommend, don't go any higher than 2 classes, honestly. And then he talks about the take and stuff like that, as far as, like what multi-classing will turn your characters into. It has to kind of fit with a story. So let's say you guys go back to the tavern after going through a dungeon, you're dividing up the loot, all that stuff. That's where the take would come in. All that stuff. Then it gets into the upper hand. And so this is using stuff like cover, distance, henchmen, or surprise. Rolls are never modified, penalties are not imposed, bonuses are not earned by gaining the upper hand. A character or group of characters simply earns advantage or disadvantage based on who has the upper hand. So if you ambush someone, you have the upper hand. If they ambush you, they have the upper hand. And so it's all about, how to get that. So if you sneak up on someone, you'll get advantage on them. Then you get into enemy stuff, real challenge rating. And so all monster stats are created, armor class 10 plus CR, hit points 10 times CR, check and attack rolls, d20 plus CR, and XP values equal CR times 200. It talks a little bit about monster AI. For stuff like that, I'd read The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Amon. That's the best resource for what does my monster do in this, situation. It talks a little bit about environmental monsters, hordes. As far as hordes and mass combat goes, again, Professor Dungeon Master has a great video on mass combat. Basically, you just, for every advantage each side of a mass combat has, you add an extra d20, and then you take the highest roll, and you compare them, and whichever side has the highest roll comes out victorious in that particular skirmish. Your players roll to see if they survive. We'll talk a little bit about that next week. And then there's the GM style. Talks about verisimilitude, which just means, basically your world is, there are rules that are consistently applied in the rule. You have to stay true to the material. You have to stay true to the number. Fixed challenge, prestige. When players complete a block of play in hardcore mode, the fixed nature challenge should come with a great sense of accomplishment. So while everything out there is killing and murderous, and it's very hard to survive in this world, overcoming that is that much better. And then he talks a little bit about zones, which you've already talked a little bit about. So we'll move past that. And then he also recommends getting rid of opportunity attacks. And there's a greed initiative. Few things slow the intensity of play, like held actions, bonus actions, and other mucking about with turn order and timing. So you remove those. Initiative remains an exciting part to play. And so this is kind of a different initiative system. It's GM versus players. If the players win, they decide their order and who starts, and then you go left from there. If the GM wins, you go first, and then the players decide what order they go in. And then it goes on to talk about the darkness. This is kind of the feel of hardcore mode. Talking about grimdark or Drimgark, as he says here. And basically, he mentions talking a little bit about like giant evil monstrosities, but that's more metal than grimdark. Darkness is foreboding. It's hidden. It's not always obvious. That kind of stuff. And then, creating an atmosphere of dread. All that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of, tools in here to discuss, different ways to make your game kind of grimdark. And then it gets into adventures. And you get into where it says GM eyes only. And these are, adventure ideas that help you just get kind of a feel of, what this is, and then it gets into the adventure itself. Jar of Flies. So that's 5e hardcore mode, and this is more of the OSR stuff where it kind of enters the conversation. That's more where, that kind of stuff comes in. So, if that's what you're looking to add to the game, again, this is a great resource. I like going to level 20, and I like milestone leveling. XP I find kind of cumbersome. But, those are just my thoughts. Other than that, this is a great tool for lethalizing 5e. And simplifying 5e, honestly. So, if you want to kind of OSR up 5e, this is a great tool for it. In fact, the system or the setting that I'm working on is going to rely very heavily on 5e hardcore mode. It's going to be a recommended material there. So, yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's, this has been a great, talk about some of the stuff that Hank and Fernell has done. In my opinion, I really enjoy both of these products. I recommend them highly. If you want to simplify your game and just kind of, cut to the chase, these are two great products to do it. 5e hardcore mode, especially if you want to kill your players. And just create something super challenging for them. So yeah, there we go. That's the review. Both of these, Rollin Bone seal of approval. I recommend them if, they sound interesting to you. If you like 5e the way it is, play 5e. It's there for you. So yeah, that's it for tonight's episode of Rollin' Bones. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm really glad that we were able to talk about these games. I really enjoy both of them. As I said, next week, Professor Dungeon Master is going to be on here talking about a lot of similar stuff. So this is kind of a good primer for that episode. So, yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining me this evening. And remember, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I'll see you next time.